Hello, we're here on the last day of Collision. I'm joined here by Ananya Shada from the Knowledge Society. Hello, Ananya, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me.
Amazing, amazing. So Ananya actually spoke at Web Summit last year in Lisbon and also spoke on our Women in Tech stage today at Collision. So could you talk a little bit about what you spoke about on the Women in Tech stage?
Yeah, so I spoke about my journey in tech so far and a couple of different things I've learned, and also so I care a lot about making sure a lot of people are aware about the technologies that will totally redefine humanity. Because there are things like brain-computer interfaces, machine learning, blockchain that will totally change our lives. But because so few people know about it, especially not women and the general public, it's really hard to move forward. Yeah.
And how did you get into the areas of sort of like machine learning and blockchain? How did you sort of find yourself interested in these kind of newer areas of tech?
It's actually a really long, fun story. I started off in genetics. I did 2 years of gene editing research at Sickett's Hospital and was in the lab that cured muscular dystrophy in mouse models. And now they're on clinical trials. But while I was there, I noticed that there was a problem in how you got genetic data to research data sets. So I built a platform to allow people to anonymously upload genetic information. And even though it was anonymous, they could still get paid for their contributions. So that used blockchain, and then so that project was moved into a larger company called Consensus, where I worked a bit as a consultant, and then now I'm on the investment committee for Babel Ventures and on the AI team at IBM.
That is quite a list of achievements for your age. Would you mind? I know it's impolite to ask a lady her age, but like, when did you start all this out? Like,
I started when I was like 13 or 14, and now I'm 17.
yeah, that's quite a lot. I don't think I had quite achieved anything like that by the time I turned 17, so it's really admirable. So would you mind just talking to us a little bit about some of the projects that you've worked on? For example, you mentioned sort of brain-powered technology. I know that you were working on some like prosthetic limbs. So could you talk a little bit about those projects and the sort of advances that you've made there?
Of course. Brain-computer interfaces are actually crazy. Ray Kurzweil, who used to be the head of engineering at Google, pretty renowned futurist, thinks that by the 2030s, we might just all have brain chips. And even if you say he's early, but 2050s we'll have brain chips. Like, that's crazy. So I wanted to learn more. I built a brain-controlled, remote-controlled car that sensed your brainwaves using EEG sensors and was able to translate those into different inputs to move the car. And then I used the same technology to track your EMG signals to move prosthetics. And then, alongside Microsoft, was working on brain-controlled virtual reality games, also using EEG signals.
Amazing, yeah. So it's like literal mind control, and that is sort of an area of tech that it's very much sort of, I wouldn't say that it's in its infancy, but we're not really seeing it in popular sort of use at the moment. So around when, like, I know you mentioned that you kind of see this sort of starting to come in the 2030s, but when do you think that we'll start to see this in much more sort of popular use?
Right. There are companies like Kernel, Neuralink, Facebook who have invested hundreds of millions of dollars in creating neural interfaces. And the research studies that people are doing are actually insane. Like, Duke University did a study where they're able to achieve brain-to-brain communication, primitive, in mice. And the University of Washington were able to do brain-to-brain communication to play a video game with people. So, like, people think that in the future, instead of me talking with you guys, you would just, like, already know.
Literal telepathy, right? Yeah. So it'd be like mind reading in a very literal sense.
And there's a lot of work that needs to be done. The hardware is nowhere close to being there yet. We barely understand the brain, but I think that in the future it'll definitely happen for sure.
And do you think that there are any, like as you mentioned, we sort of have, we don't really understand the brain right now, right? So do you think there are any sort of like health risks associated with sort of the testing process of these neural programs?
100%. One of the biggest problems actually is when you put a brain implant in someone's body, it degrades over time, and it degrades really quickly. So in order to develop these technologies, people need to find materials that sustain inside your body for a long period of time. There are so many questions. Like, I actually got into the space because I was terrified. I was so scared. The US military is doing clinical trials for a brain implant that can sense if you're about to have a PTSD episode and then combat those signals to prevent an attack. But if you think about it, it's essentially a third party controlling your emotions. A third party is in clinical trials for controlling how you feel. And there are so many ethical questions. Like, what if your brain could be hacked? I don't know, but yeah, after doing a lot of thinking, I came to the conclusion that it's really hard to stop companies from developing, especially when there's really big economic incentive to do so. So I figured that I wanted to learn a lot about the space so that hopefully in the future I can be big enough to use it for good, you know?
Forewarned is forearmed, right? And I guess, in the general sense, what is the tech trend that you're sort of finding the most exciting at the moment?
There are so many. The thing that's really interesting about technology is if you plot the statistics, like the cost of sequencing a genome or the efficiency of machine learning or the smaller we get transistors, it's all been like an exponential curve. But the crazy thing about an exponential curve is we can't even conceive it as humans because humans are programmed to think linearly. So it happens so fast that you don't see the technology coming until it's too late. And that's why I really have to keep track, or like I feel like I should be keeping track of technologies that don't seem like they're going very fast, because when they finally take off, it'll just be like so quick that we won't even. So machine learning's almost there, I think. It's starting to take off. I think it'll become even more crazy in our near future.
Yeah, and I guess sort of on like to compare it to something that we've definitely seen at a later stage, you could sort of compare it to the impact of social media, right? In that we can never predict like the sort of ramifications of these things until they're actually almost too far along, right? So I guess you could say the same. What's the sort of tech trend that you're a little bit more sort of wary of or sort of scared of?
I found that as humans get more connected with the internet, we're becoming more lonely. And belonging in community is such a big part of human development. Aristotle actually, so he did a lot of thinking about what the purpose of life is, how do we reach higher orders of happiness, and one of his very first things that must be achieved are belonging in community. And in my future, I want to try and solve the problem because it's so hard, but with technology moving forward, like if we had brain-to-brain communication, it could like allow for true empathy, but it would totally redefine what it means to be human.
Exactly. And then I guess it becomes a question of what's the person and what's the machine, right? So it's sort of we can't really tell where that line is going to be until we're there, right? So yeah, no, it is. It's a scary thought, but also intriguing because we won't know until we're there. Could you actually tell us a little bit about the Knowledge Society? So we had an interview with Nina earlier, my colleague Neve did. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
I'm so grateful for the Knowledge Society. It totally changed my life. They were the organization that exposed me to all the exponential technologies. Like I didn't even know like gene editing was a thing, or like I'd heard of Bitcoin, and like I didn't even know that existed. And then they exposed us to like conferences, like how to meet people. But the kids that I met totally changed my life. Like so much belonging in community. Oh, pretty much what the Knowledge Society is it's a human accelerator program that's really trying to develop young people to be able to eventually solve some of the world's hardest problems. To give you, like, when you think about educational institutions like Stanford or Harvard or MIT, they're amazing. And when you graduate, you have some sort of credibility, but people are impressed that you got into the school. Like, they're like, oh, I got accepted into Stanford. That's the impressive thing. So these institutions are filtering institutions. You're not impressed by how they develop you while you're there. You're impressed that you got in. So the Knowledge Society is really unique in that it takes a whole bunch of people and develops them. Like they taught me about philosophy, about like how to reach out to people, how to got me excited about technology so that I can go build on my own, go learn on my own. But like it's totally changed my life.
And what are the sort of different areas of interest that you've encountered with the different people in the Knowledge Society? So are there different young people working in different areas, and what kind of different areas have you seen?
There are so many different areas that people are working in. So how it works is people focus in different areas of exponential technology, and that's essentially technology that will change humanity a lot. To give you some context, nanotech is huge. People are using graphene, carbon nanotubes, really small materials to do crazy things. Nanotech, gene editing, alternative energy, virtual reality, augmented reality, IoT, edge computing, quantum computing. There's so much stuff all over the place because there's like the world is moving so quickly.
Yeah.
And the crazy thing is, so the first year for the program is understanding about exponential technologies, and the second year is trying to understand problems and understand ourselves so that we can try and solve some of these problems with technology. So how do we make insurance different by using blockchain? So instead of, for example, a centralized insurance institution, you can actually distribute risk without the middleman. Or when I built my genetic information data sharing platform, it was using gene editing and blockchain. If I didn't have both those two things, I couldn't solve the problem. So yeah, they're learning about different things and then using them to solve problems.
Amazing. It's really exciting just to hear about these sort of institutions for younger people, right? Because ultimately, you guys are going to be the ones that are going to be bringing in all of these technologies that we can't even fathom right now. So yeah, no, so it sounds amazing. I guess just to wrap up, I want to ask you, what's been your highlight of Collision then?
The people are amazing. Oh my goodness. Like, everyone's so kind. The organizers are so kind. And like the people I've met have been like totally blown my mind. So some of the conversations I've had, I just sit back and I'm like, wow, other people think about this stuff too. And I'm so excited to get to share and meet with a whole bunch of new people that typically never would have been brought together.
And could you give us an example of like one amazing connection that you've made, or like a really cool conversation that you've had while you've been?
So I was talking with the CTO and co-founder of the Trade Desk, and it's like $10 billion company that does. They have a marketplace for advertising. He was like, so basically he was telling me his story of how when you look at the New York Stock Exchange, what they did was they have a place to purchase and buy stocks. But then you look at the market cap of the New York Stock Exchange itself, and the market cap is so small. But then Goldman Sachs is a huge company that relies on the New York Stock Exchange. So what he did at the Trade Desk was he created the New York Stock Exchange for ads, allowing you to buy and sell ads, and then he created the Goldman Sachs version where he was able to then buy and sell and create a layer around his exchange. Yeah. And I was like, wow, that's so clever. Wow. Like, who would have thought of that?
It is really cool, some of the people that you meet, right? So like it's obviously, and there's so many different areas as well covered. So obviously we've got all the different stages. So you kind of end up with this mix of people in tech from all these different industries. So kind of the opportunity to meet people is amazing. All right. Well, with that, I think I'm going to let you go. No doubt we'll see you on one of our stages speaking again soon. And thank you very much.